Let me tell you something you already feel in your bones every time you approach that security line at an American airport. The rules don't always make sense. You stand there, holding your bin, watching the person ahead of you get a full pat down because of a forgotten lip balm, while someone else sails through with a mysterious gadget you've never seen before. You've read the TSA website, you've tried to follow the rules, and yet there's this lingering, low-grade anxiety that today will be the day you get pulled aside, your belongings strewn across the table for all to see, because of something you never imagined would be a problem. I've been there. I've also been the person watching it all unfold from the other side. Not as an agent, but as someone who has spent more hours in terminals than I care to admit, researching, asking questions, and learning the hard way that what's allowed and what's forbidden at a U.S. airport is a story of contradictions, evolving threats, human judgment, and a surprising number of myths that even seasoned travelers believe. So here's my question for you. Before we dive into the gritty details, what's the one item you've always been genuinely nervous about bringing through a TSA checkpoint? Or the one time you were absolutely convinced you'd be in trouble, but it turned out to be completely fine? I want you to think about that, and I want you to share that story in the comments below, because I guarantee your experience is part of a bigger, messier picture of airport security that we're going to unpack together. Stick with me, because some of what I'm about to explain will save you time, some of it will save you money, and some of it might just save you from a very awkward and stressful conversation with a uniformed officer. This isn't just a list of rules, this is the why behind them, the loopholes, the officer discretion, and the realities that the official brochures don't cover. The first thing you have to internalize is that the Transportation Security Administration does not operate on a simple list of allowed and forbidden items. That's the grand illusion. If it were that simple, they could just hand you a sheet of paper, and we'd all be on our way. Instead, they operate on a foundation of risk-based assessment, layered with technology, human training, and a constant adaptive response to threat intelligence. This is why you can feel whiplash from one airport to another, or even from one lane to another in the same terminal. The core mandate is to prevent catastrophic events aboard an aircraft. Everything else, the liquids, the laptops, the shoes, is a proxy for that goal, a security theater element designed to deter, detect, and delay. Understanding this mindset is more important than memorizing any single rule. The officer isn't just looking for a banned item. They're looking for your intent, your demeanor, and anomalies in your story and your belongings. Let's start with the most iconic of post-9/11 rules: the liquids. The 311 rule is drilled into us. 3.4-ounce containers, one quart-sized bag, one bag per passenger. You know it. But do you understand it? The rule wasn't born out of a fear that someone would bring a single bottle of shampoo on board to make a mess. It was a direct and frankly rushed response to a very specific foiled plot involving liquid explosives. The limitation is about volume and concentration. The idea is that the amount of potentially dangerous liquid chemical precursors you could smuggle in a dozen tiny bottles is insufficient to create a viable explosive device. Now, here's where it gets fuzzy in practice. Is it 3.4 ounces or 100 milliliters? Officially, it's 3.4 Oz, which is the metric approximation of 100 ml. They use 3.4 because it's easier for Americans to visualize. But if your toothpaste tube says 100 ml, it's coming in at 3.38 ounces. Is an officer going to break out calipers? Almost certainly not. They're looking at the container size, not the remaining amount. A 4.2-ounce bottle that's half empty is still a prohibited container. The container itself is the trigger. But then we have exceptions that seem to contradict the very logic of the rule. What about medication? Baby formula? Breast milk? These are the fascinating wrinkles. You are allowed to bring medically necessary liquids, creams, and gels in quantities greater than 3.4 ounces. They must be declared to the officer at the start of the screening process. They will likely be tested separately, often with a vapors test. This is a perfect example of risk-based thinking. The vast majority of travelers bringing Ensure for an elderly parent or insulin coolers are not security threats. The system allows for this humanity, but it requires you to announce it. Don't try to sneak a large bottle of contact lens solution through in your toiletry bag. Declare it. The act of declaring it is a psychological marker of compliance. It shows you're not trying to hide anything. The same goes for baby nourishment. A parent traveling with an infant can bring a reasonable amount of formula, breast milk, or juice. Reasonable is key. Is a full gallon of milk reasonable for a 3-hour flight? Probably not, and that might invite additional screening. But several pre-filled bottles? absolutely fine. The officer's discretion here is guided by the presence of the actual baby. If you're a solo traveler with a gallon of milk, be prepared for a very thorough conversation. Now let's talk about solids versus liquids. This is a huge area of confusion. Is peanut butter a liquid? According to the TSA, yes, it's a spreadable, gel-like substance. Hummus, also a liquid. Yogurt, liquid. The official line is, if you can spill it, spread it, spray it, pump it, or pour it, it's considered a liquid. This is where tourists get caught constantly. They buy a lovely local jam or artisanal salsa as a souvenir, pack it in their carry-on, and are stunned when it's confiscated. A solid block of cheese, that's fine. A creamy, spreadable cheese, that's a liquid. The line is absurd, but distinct. I've seen officers debate the liquidity of a particularly dense fig preserve. When in doubt, assume it's a liquid and pack it in your checked bag, or be prepared to lose it. Food in general is a wild card. You can bring virtually any solid food through security. A full Thanksgiving turkey dinner on a plate? Technically, yes, but it will look bizarre on the X-ray and will almost certainly get your bag pulled for a manual search. Why? Because organic material has a specific density and shape on the scanner. A dense, amorphous mass can look suspicious. If you're bringing food, pack it neatly. A sandwich is fine. A whole cake is fine, though it might get a second look. The real issue arises with foods that have a high moisture content or are gel-like. And then there's the smell factor. Please, for the love of all that is holy, do not unpack a durian fruit in the security line. You might be allowed to bring it, but you will become a legend, and not in a good way. The electronics landscape has changed dramatically. Remember when we all had to take out our laptops and place them in a separate bin? For a while, that was the sacrament of security. Then, with newer computed tomography, CT scanners, the ones that look like fancy hospital machines and are slowly rolling out to major airports, you often don't have to remove anything. But here's the critical point. Most airports in the US still use the older technology. The rule of thumb is, be prepared to remove any electronics larger than a cell phone. That means laptops, tablets, e-readers, and large cameras. The reason is layered. A dense electronic device is the perfect place to hide a component or material. By isolating it in the bin, the officer gets an unobstructed X-ray view. Stacking devices on top of each other in your bag creates a visual clutter that the machine and the officer cannot decipher. What about gaming consoles? Yes, take out your Nintendo Switch or Steam Deck. They count. Power bricks and battery packs? Usually you can leave those in, but if they're large and dense, it might slow things down. My personal strategy is to have a separate, easily accessible sleeve for all my large electronics. When I approach the line, I can unzip one compartment and dump them all into a bin in 3 seconds. It signals to the officer that I'm a prepared traveler, and it speeds up my process. Batteries and power banks are a separate, crucial topic. This is where safety and security intersect powerfully. Lithium-ion batteries are forbidden in checked baggage. You must carry them on. Why? Because they are a fire risk. In the cabin, if a battery enters thermal runaway and starts to smoke or burn, the flight crew can identify it and use fire extinguishers. In the cargo hold, a smoldering battery in a suitcase could lead to an uncontrollable fire. The rule is strict. Spare batteries must be in your carry-on, and they must be protected from short-circuiting. That means keeping them in their original retail packaging, placing tape over the terminals, or using a dedicated battery case. The watt-hour rating matters too. For most consumer electronics, you're fine. But if you're traveling with professional camera gear or large drone batteries, you need to check the ratings. There are limits, and you may need airline approval. I once saw a filmmaker have a very intense discussion about a battery for a high-end cinema light. He had the documentation, he knew the rules, and he prevailed. Without that knowledge, those batteries would have been left behind. Now, onto the truly surprising items, the ones that make tourists' jaws drop. Let's start with tools. A common belief is that all tools are prohibited. Not true. You can bring screwdrivers, wrenches, and pliers that are less than 7 inches in length. A small adjustable wrench? Fine. A full-size crowbar? Not fine. Why the distinction? A small tool could be part of a hobbyist's kit or for a quick repair at your destination. A large tool is a potential blunt force weapon. The same logic applies to sporting goods. A small pocket knife? For years, this was the most contentious item. Currently, the rule states knives must be less than 2.36 inches from the pivot point and less than 0.5 inches in width to be allowed in carry-on. But let me give you the real-world advice. Just don't. Even if your elegant Swiss Army knife is technically within limits, the officer has to measure it. That takes time. It can be subjective. I've seen officers confiscate knives that the traveler swore were within limits. The hassle is never worth it. Put all blades in your checked bag. If you must carry a multi-tool, make sure it has no blade at all. The TSA is notoriously inconsistent on this point, and you are at the mercy of that individual officer's interpretation. What about self-defense items? This is a clear divide. Anything designed as a weapon is forbidden in carry-on. Brass knuckles, martial arts weapons, stun guns, and pepper spray are out. However, and this is a huge however, you can check pepper spray in your luggage under very specific conditions. It must be a small, consumer-sized canister with a safety mechanism to prevent accidental discharge, and it cannot exceed a certain concentration. You must declare it to the airline at check-in. Never, ever try to bring it through security. Tasers and stun guns are generally prohibited altogether, even in checked baggage, unless you are a law enforcement officer with proper credentials. The philosophy here is direct. You cannot have immediate access to a weapon during a flight. The checked baggage compartment is considered inaccessible enough to mitigate that risk. Let's talk about the bizarre and the mundane. You can bring a full-sized metal corkscrew in your carry-on, the small, foldable kind with a little blade for cutting foil. That little blade makes it prohibited. You can bring knitting needles and crochet hooks. Scissors? Yes, but only if the blades are less than 4 inches from the pivot point. Round-bladed or plastic safety scissors are fine regardless. You can bring a hockey stick. Seriously, you'll have to check with the airline about fitting it in the cabin, but the TSA will allow it through security. You can bring a bowling ball, you can bring a musical instrument, and they have specific guidelines urging officers to be careful with them. You can even bring a wedding dress in a giant garment bag. These items aren't threats in the security paradigm. They're just odd-shaped, dense objects that will require a manual search. Then we have the outright prohibited items that people still try to bring, often out of sheer forgetfulness. Firearms. This is the single biggest mistake with the most severe consequences. You cannot have a gun in your carry-on. Ever. Full stop. But you can transport a firearm in checked baggage provided it is unloaded, locked in a hard-sided container, and declared to the airline at the ticket counter. The ammunition must also be packed properly. If you accidentally bring a gun to the security checkpoint, you will be detained. You will be fined heavily. You will likely miss your flight. You may face criminal charges. This happens every single day in America. People claim they forgot that it was in a purse or a backpack from a range trip. The TSA does not accept this as an excuse. The moment it enters the X-ray tunnel, your day is over. Treat firearms with the seriousness they demand. Lighters and matches are another curious category. One book of safety matches or one lighter, disposable or Zippo style, is allowed on your person or in your carry-on. Torch lighters, like those used for cigars, are prohibited. You also cannot pack lighters or matches in checked baggage. The rationale is again about fire risk and control. A lighter on your person is a known quantity. A bunch of lighters loose in a checked bag is a hazard. The screening process itself is where theory meets reality. The walk-through metal detector is the baseline. It's looking for metallic mass. But the advanced imaging technology, AIT scanner, the one you stand in with your hands up, is looking for anomalies. It's not showing your naked body despite the urban legends. It's showing a generic avatar with yellow boxes indicating areas that need pat-down inspection. Those alarms can be triggered by the darndest things. A wrinkled shirt, a money belt, sweat, or even certain types of medical adhesives. If you alarm, you will get a pat-down. It's procedural, not punitive. You have rights during a pat-down. You can request it to be conducted in a private area. You can have a witness of your choice present. You can ask the officer to explain what they are doing before they do it. Being combative or nervous, while understandable, only raises flags. The best approach is calm, silent compliance. Answer direct questions, but don't offer a running commentary. Your belongings in the X-ray are telling a story. A cluttered, messy bag is a red flag. It's hard to interpret. Officers are trained to look for specific threat items. Wires, blocks of material, shapes of explosives, and clutter hides those shapes. A neatly packed bag, with electronics easily removable, is a bag that gets through faster. Think of it as a conversation with the officer viewing the screen. A clean bag says, "I have nothing to hide." A bag that looks like a hurricane hit it says, "I might be hiding something, or I'm just disorganized, but now you have to check to be sure." Then there's the human element, the most unpredictable variable of all. TSA officers have a difficult, monotonous, and critically important job. They see thousands of people a day. They operate under constant pressure. They also have significant discretion. One officer might let a slightly oversized liquid pass with a warning because the traveler is polite and apologetic. Another, having just dealt with a belligerent passenger, might strictly enforce the letter of the law. Your attitude is your greatest asset or liability. Courtesy costs nothing. Have your ID and boarding pass ready. Look the officer in the eye when you hand it over. If you're pulled aside, don't sigh dramatically or make snide comments. The phrase, "you're just doing your job," can be magical. Conversely, asserting your rights in an aggressive manner, while legally permissible, will almost certainly result in the most thorough, by-the-book screening they can administer. You can be right and still miss your flight. Pre-check, global entry, clear. These trusted traveler programs change the calculus dramatically. TSA PreCheck isn't just about keeping your shoes on. It's a paradigm shift. You have been vetted in advance. You are a lower-risk traveler in their system. This means the rules relax. You can leave your liquids and laptops in your bag. You can keep your belt and light jacket on. The line moves faster, not just because there are fewer people, but because the screening protocol is less intensive. It is, in my opinion, the single most valuable investment a frequent traveler can make. It's not just about time. It's about reducing the stress and unpredictability of the security experience. It is the closest thing to a list of allowed items actually working, because the system has already decided you are more likely to be compliant. For international tourists, the shocks are manifold. The sheer size and chaos of major U.S. airports can be overwhelming. The strictness of the ID requirements is another. In many countries, a boarding pass is enough. In the U.S., a valid passport is required for international travel, and a real ID-compliant driver's license or other approved ID is required for domestic travel as of the upcoming deadlines. The concept of removing shoes is still unique to the U.S. for most adults. The idea that TSA can search your phone or laptop, they can ask for your passwords, though they rarely do without specific suspicion, is a privacy intrusion many foreigners find shocking. They may also not be used to the level of directness and authority in an officer's commands. What might feel like rudeness is often just clipped efficiency. Medical conditions and disabilities add another layer of complexity. The system can and does accommodate you, but you must communicate. If you have a pacemaker or other implant, you cannot go through the metal detector or AIT scanner. You will need a pat-down. Tell the officer before you enter any scanner. Have a card from your doctor if possible. If you have a hidden disability like autism or PTSD, you can request a passenger support specialist or a more discreet screening. The same goes for religious or cultural garments. A pat-down can be modified. You can request an officer of a specific gender. The key is to speak up early, at the very start of the process, not when you're already in the middle of it and panicking. The future of security is already creeping into the present. Those CT scanners I mentioned are game changers. They create a 3D image that an officer can rotate and examine virtually. This technology may eventually eliminate the need for the liquids rule altogether, as they can algorithmically analyze the chemical composition of a substance. Biometrics are expanding, your face becoming your boarding pass and ID. This promises speed but raises profound questions about surveillance and data storage. The balance between convenience and security is always shifting. So after all this, what's the ultimate takeaway? The list of things TSA allows versus forbids is not a static document. It's a living, breathing protocol shaped by past attacks, imagined future threats, available technology, and human judgment. The most dangerous item you can bring to a checkpoint is not a forgotten bottle of water or a questionable tool. It's a bad attitude coupled with ignorance. Your best defense is a combination of knowledge and demeanor. Know the core rules, understand the logic behind them, and pack with clarity and intention. Be polite, be patient, and be prepared. Pack your patience with your passport. Remember that item you thought of at the beginning? The one that made you nervous? Look it up on the TSA's own website, but also understand that the final arbiter is the person in uniform on that particular day. When you travel, you are entering a system designed for the lowest common denominator of risk. You surrender a degree of privacy and convenience for collective safety. The friction you feel is the system working. Sometimes it works clumsily, sometimes it feels irrational, but its failures are quiet and its successes are invisible. You walk onto that plane, stow your bag, and settle into your seat, rarely thinking about the layered defenses that got you there. That, in the end, is the point. The goal is not a perfect system, but a confident one. Confident enough that you can forget about it entirely and just think about where you're going, not what you had to leave behind. Now go check those comments. I'm willing to bet someone has a story about a jar of pickles or a lucky charm that nearly caused an international incident. And that's the human reality of airport security, always more interesting and more absurd than the rules on paper.